This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 154, Storytelling and Star Wars. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is December 24th, 2015. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Now, I have to apologize if I sound a little bit stuffy. It's because I have been fighting a cold and losing. I finally admitted defeat, so I am medicated to the gills, but I will try to keep the coughing to a minimum. Okay, just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. To learn more about content marketing, I invite you to download our free audio, 5 Things You Must Know About Content Marketing, at contentmarketingaudio.com. Now, before we get started, I want to give a special shout out to Bonnie Troigard. Bonnie, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Denmark. Bonnie is a blogger who is very passionate about all things content marketing, and she recently published a blog post featuring her 5 favorite content marketing podcasts, and she was kind enough to include this podcast on the list. So thank you, Bonnie, and I'm so happy to hear that you are enjoying what we do here. Okay, on to business. Last week, we had a terrific conversation with Shabri Raja, the co-founder and CEO of Nepris, who joined us to talk about how her company connects industry experts with classrooms. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. This week, we are taking a bit of a break from our usual fare and tapping into kind of a pop culture vibe, and we're going to be looking at storytelling and Star Wars. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. As you might imagine, there's not a whole lot going on news-wise these days, but there is a very important development happening over at Facebook. Facebook is actually taking a swipe at Yelp with its latest functionality, which is called Professional Services. If you go to facebook.com/services, you can actually search for businesses by service. So, for example, plumbers, contractors, etc., and location. So you can say, I'm looking for a hair salon in in Houston, Texas. Now, the interesting thing about this is it was not officially announced by Facebook. It's a pretty major functionality, and Facebook opted not to do a major announcement. And the reason I found it is that our friends at Search Engine Land stumbled upon it and published a post about it. Now, the feature is currently available in desktop only, and that might be why Facebook's not announced it yet, that it's currently available only in desktop only. But the interesting about the results is that they take into account Facebook's 5-star rating system. If a user pulls up a list, or pulls up a search, the results will display the business's contact information and hours of business, and will also feature excerpts from reviews that have come into Facebook. And of course, there will be a link to see more reviews on the business's Facebook page. So I guess the lesson here is that if you've been neglecting your Facebook page, it's probably a good time to get it spruced up, because with this new Yelp killer or purported Yelp killer, people are going to be doing those searches directly on Facebook. Again, if you want to go check out this new feature, it is live on the desktop version of Facebook, and you're just going to go to facebook.com/services. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called "Let These 5 Trends Guide Your 2016 Content Marketing Resolutions." And this was written by Kelsey Meyer over on Entrepreneur. Now, of course, it is that time of year where we talk about trends in the new year and, of course, New Year's resolutions. Well, if you've been listening to this podcast, you will know that I despise New Year's resolutions. I think they're a waste of time and effort, but that is neither here nor there. This is actually a very good post because Kelsey really puts a lot of thought into the trends that have come about in 2015 and how they can guide our activities and our strategies in 2016. And what really stood out was that trend number 1 and trend number 2 were both focused on content quality. Yay! That just warms the cockles of my heart when we talk about quality. So anyway, the whole article is quite interesting. I recommend that you check it out. And of course, I will share a link to it in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Storytelling and Star Wars. This episode, of course, is airing on December 24th, which is Christmas Eve. And if you are trying to get any serious work done today, all I can say is God bless you. I've been visiting clients all week, past couple of weeks actually, delivering Christmas goodies and, of course, delivering their holiday gifts. And one thing I've noticed, actually I've noticed 2 things. Number 1, the offices are very, very sparsely populated because there are a lot of folks who are on vacation, taking those vacation days before the end of the year. And the second thing I've noticed is that the folks who are there in the office are completely frazzled. They are scrambling to get everything done that needs doing before the end of the year. And of course, they are working with the skeleton crew. So whether you are on vacation or one of those workers at work trying to get stuff done, it is not a day for serious discourse about content marketing. So I thought for today's episode, we might lighten things up a bit and tap into the biggest pop culture phenomenon going on right now. And I'm talking, of course, about Star Wars. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of months, you've no doubt heard some of the mass amount of hype around the latest Star Wars movie. It's called The Force Awakens, and it came out on December 18th. Now, let me preface this by saying that if you hate Star Wars, and if you're so sick of hearing about this movie, please bear with me, because I am going to bring this around to some very interesting insights about content marketing. So promise, I'm holding up my 2 fingers in my Scout's Honor salute, and promise you that I'm going to bring this around to content marketing. So I am not what you would call a Star Wars geek. I have never stood in line to get tickets for a Star Wars movie. I was not one of those waiting with bated breath with my finger poised on the mouse to get tickets for this latest movie. In fact, I haven't seen the latest movie yet, but I would call myself a fan of this series, at least at the beginning. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The first movie, which was released in 1977, was absolutely phenomenon. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. I think I was in 3rd grade at the time, and it was just, people were completely captivated by it because they had never seen a sci-fi movie with the kind of crossover appeal that Star Wars had. Now, if you recall, that first film was actually Episode 4, which was titled A New Hope. And the reason that it was not called Episode 4, A New Hope, is that no one had any idea that there would be any further movies that followed. George Lucas took a risk. He had actually written out the entire series and decided to make this first movie kind of in the middle. And it was a big gamble. No one had any idea that it would take off as it did. Well, as we know, that first movie was a huge success, and it was followed by the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back, which was released in 1980, and a third movie, Return of the Jedi, in 1983. And, as a fan of this series, I will say it was with the third movie that I started to see a bit of a shift. And that shift was the series kind of ceased to be about storytelling and became more about being a franchise. It was almost like I could place myself in those meetings and I could hear those discussions behind this movie where people were saying, okay, how many action figures are we going to sell? What's going to be the toy in the McDonald's Star Wars Happy Meal that's going to coincide with this release? What's the theme park ride going to look like? And it was really with that third movie that I feel Lucas really started to lose his storyteller's edge. The first two movies, they had an earnestness about them. Earnestness. Sorry, it's my stuffiness creeping in. The first two movies had an earnestness about them. And by the third one, Lucas had the franchise was established. It was established this was going to be something that was going to go on for a long time. Lucas had money, he had more creative control, and it became about the brand. It became about the revenue. It became about the cross-marketing opportunities. And, okay, don't even get me started on the waste of film that was that episode 1 through 3 nonsense that we had a few years ago. Yeah, I don't even want to go there. So now we have the next installment, which is, if you're keeping track, it's episode 7 in the series. And episode 7 really is A New Hope, because we are all hoping that it will recapture the magic of those earlier movies. As I said, I've not seen this latest movie, and whether it succeeds or not for bringing back that magic, I don't know. And I will see it at some point, and I will probably report back to you. But as far as content marketing goes, okay, Star Wars haters, this is when you can come back in the room, because this is the content marketing part of this discourse. I was thinking the other day about how the Star Wars series had edged away from storytelling and really turned into a franchise. And the thought hit me, and it was a very sobering thought. Am I doing that in my own content? Have I become so quote unquote strategic in my content marketing that I've lost a little bit of my storyteller's soul in the process? And it got me to thinking about how that's a hazard that we face as content marketing, as content marketers. We start off very gung-ho and full of passion, and then as we keep creating that content on a regular basis, creating, and we're looking at our analytics and we're learning about best practices, yes, we do evolve. And that evolution is not a bad thing, but the question I find myself dealing with is, for me at least, has that evolution come at a price? And I'm going to take a sip of my water here. Pardon me just a moment. Okay. And as I pondered this question, I recalled that one of my most successful blog posts of all time was a post I wrote called, it was a few years ago, it was called, "What a Can of Red Bull Taught Me About Content Marketing." And the way this post came about was I had an interesting experience one day at the gym, and as I was driving home, I really related this to content marketing, and then I went home and wrote a blog post about it. And I reread that post recently, and I found myself asking, would this be a post that I would write today? Because the thing is, I rarely have that spontaneous experience anymore. When it's time to create content, I sit down with my editorial calendar and my Twitter trending topics and my best practices and my Google search results. And it's rare that I actually ask myself, okay, set all that aside, and is there a story in me that's dying to come out in this content? And if so, why am I not telling it? And to think further, if I tell this story, am I prepared to deal with the possible consequences? Am I prepared to deal with a story that really shares something that's on my heart and deal with the possibility that it might not get great traffic? It might not get a whole lot of shares and likes and retweets. So that's the mission that I set for myself. As I get into what is kind of a quiet time of year for me, a lot of my clients are off, and some of them are closed through the end of the year, but a lot of them are not very active. So it's a quiet time for me business-wise, and I'm really going to do some long, hard thinking about this question, about have I lost some of that storyteller's mojo over the years, and how can I get it back? What can I do to get the magic back as this new episode of Star Wars is trying to recapture the magic of those early episodes? So that's what I'm going to be doing, and I invite you to join me. If you have some downtime this holiday season, I invite you to take a look at your own content and ask yourself, is there something that has gradually been lost over the years? And if so, we can all start thinking about how we can get that something back. So I told you that this episode was going to be a little bit different, and indeed, I've probably left you with more questions than answers. And in my mind, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I hope that in exploring answers to those questions, you can uncover some of your own revelations. And as those revelations come up, I hope that you will share them with me. Please let me know what you find as you explore this question along with me. Okay, if you have any questions, of course, or want to add to this conversation, I would love to hear from you. And the best way to reach me is through the website, resonancecontent.com. There's a Contact Us page, and also there you will find links to our to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. I think we've established that this is a slow time for a lot of businesses, especially in the B2B world. If you're in retail, maybe not so much, but for a lot of us, it's kind of a quiet time. And for me, that's a good thing. It gives me a chance to catch my breath, work on some long-term projects, do some thinking about the year to come. And one thing that I do this time of year is I get caught up on my ebook reading and my webinar watching. Yes, of course, it should be our goal to be educating ourselves all year long, but I know for me, when things get busy, it's usually that educational side of my mission that gets pushed to the back burner. And I will tell you, you would laugh if you saw my desktop on my computer. It is littered, completely littered with ebooks and other resources that I have downloaded, but never so much has opened. So during these last couple of weeks of the year, by all means, enjoy the holidays with your friends and family. First and foremost, that is the most important thing. But if you have a few moments to focus on your mission as a content marketer, it's a great opportunity to get caught up on your reading, get caught up on watching replays of those webinars, and any other activities you feel will help sharpen your axe so that we can all get brushed up, get topped off, and head into a shiny new year with confidence. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard today, my stuffiness aside, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, if you want to learn more about content marketing, I invite you to download our free resource, 5 Things You Must Know About Content Marketing. You can get your very own copy at contentmarketingaudio.com. As always, I'd like to leave you with a quote. Today's comes from, well, I think you'll recognize the source. He puzzled and puzzed till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and hey, may the force be with you. Take care.